Hey guys, Mustached Tom here, and I'm here to review the series Fallout. So, for those of you who don't know, Fallout is based on the video game made by Bethesda, also known as Fallout. Its first two games, from what I can understand, I've tried to play Fallout 1, is a way old school sort of, luck-based game where you probably had a numerous amount of choices that you can make within the context of Fallout 1, and I would assume that in Fallout 2 would be sort of a follow-up to that with perhaps a bit more quality of life aspects perhaps, but hard to say. However, by the time Fallout 3 came out is where everyone noticed the difference. This is where Bethesda acquired the licensing to make Fallout. And what occurred was a vastly different game in Fallout 3. Now, for what it's worth, Fallout 3, from what I can remember of the game, its gameplay was pretty gripping. Well, I mean, there were still the bugs and all that, but still, there was still something about it outside the bugs that kept pulling me back in. And this definitely was early on in the sort of narrative choices era of games where you could be the good guy or the bad guy, was a lot more prominent in this early setting of the type of archetypal game. And Fallout 4 was an expansion on that. However, after some years apart and coming back to Fallout 4 with a more objective lens to it, I can say with certainty, as someone who's completed the game more recently, that Fallout 4 in particular story is not that great. And by extension, I would probably wager that Fallout 3's story probably isn't as strong as we would like to remember it being either. I would willing to hedge my bets on it's probably also not that great. So when I heard that there was going to be a Fallout series, I was already in the mindset of this series is definitely going to struggle. If especially you have the writers from Bethesda writing this game series in a series format. Now, here's the thing. I love the world of Fallout. Don't get me wrong, I love this post-apocalyptic world. I love the world building of Fallout. However, the stories within the worlds is where oftentimes the writing definitely struggles, and that context definitely is something worth visiting. Now, a lot of people have pointed out how this series in particular messes with the world building. Now, I don't know exactly what they would be referring to. I guess the end of it with them finding this resource that could light up a city permanently is that thing? I mean, if I'm not mistaken, that's sort of like the end of Fallout 3. Well, if you pick the good guy ending, you pick the clean water source. That's the same thing then. Wouldn't that be in line with the lore of Fallout? I'm sorry, but I'm not seeing where the criticism of the lore being out of the question comes from, if that is the context in which, we're inhabiting this. Now, I think it is important to note that Fallout 3 and Fallout 4 are within the same universe, but take place several years apart. And they also take place in different areas. I think those are two very vital distinctions to make between 3 and 4. Now, this series, based on all the information we have, I don't know when this would be taking place in context with 3 and 4, if it is to be within the same universe. That's sort of the immediate issue that arises from this sort of series. In just the world building alone, does it take place before any of the games? It seems like some of the dialogue, anyway, seems to indicate that 3 already happened. This is just what the context I got from, because they're talking about the war on Anchorage, and I believe that is all handled in Fallout 3, if I remember everything from this game correctly. It's been a while. So the context, at least, again, for me, is that Fallout 3, in terms of the whole thing coming together, has already happened. Now, has Fallout 4 happened already? Because that takes place years later. It is hard to say, in conjunction with this series, considering it might be a prequel, because the ghoul, as he's referred to in this, is the one that comes across dog meat, and dog meat is in both 3 and 4, so that, different versions of dog meat, I guess. Or was he in 3, actually? I don't know if he was referred to the same name. I don't remember. It's been a while, so I do apologize if I don't remember 3 having dog meat. But 4 definitely has dog meat right at the get-go. And you do find him in a red rocket, which they make reference to him being placed in a red rocket and then being pulled out of it. So, again, I don't know if this is the same dog meat, or a different dog meat that just happened to have the same name, or get the same name. I don't know. So, again, I'm not sure if this takes place before or after Fallout 4, necessarily speaking. So, with that being said, let's actually dive into what this season of Fallout has to offer. So, in the first episode, we follow Lucy, Max, and the Ghoul, as again he's referred to in this show. And with that, we have 3 different perspectives that we are following. Now, to me, this is quite interestingly something that the game kind of alludes to a degree. Let me explain. So, obviously, when you begin as a vault dweller, well, that is sort of always the starting position, regardless. In Fallout 4, anyways. Now, once you escape Fallout, the vault, you can become a part of the Brotherhood, so you can sort of become a part of their sort of perspective and all of that. And it's probably the most, out of the possible endings, I would assume, that it's probably the most played one, likely. Though, I'm not going to say that with 100% certainty. I digress. So, there's that. But, what the game doesn't account for is, what if you ever wanted to play as a ghoul? Or mayhaps even a super mutant? These are 2 options that I'm surprised that Fallout has never considered actually doing, especially after seeing how this season plays out. I would expect if there were to ever be a proper Fallout 5, if we were following Fallout in a logical, numerical order instead of jumping all the way to Fallout 76, for example, instead of doing that dumb shit, follow it up from 4 to a proper Fallout 5. If they were to do that, what I would suspect that they ought to do to make that game the best Fallout game ever is this goes without saying, make sure that this game does not have bugs. Because, boy howdy, is that gonna just be like, oh boy. The second thing, upon creating your character, is perhaps opening up the options to You can start as a Vault Dweller. You can actually start as someone in the Brotherhood. You can start as a ghoul, perhaps. You can start as a super mutant, perhaps. I think making these options available at the start of the game will allow for way more broadened stories from the get-go, rather than this sort of very fixed story that Fallout 3 and 4 are both victim to at the offset. This even more so in 4 due to the fact that they have speaking characters having, again, very minuscule distinctions and choices of dialogue. So perhaps they should go back to, now it might be a little bit more challenging to go back to a silent protagonist in the world of Fallout. I don't know if it can be pulled off. I mean, it does come across as weird simultaneously in a sense. So there are pros and cons to a Fallout 5 game in that perspective of whether or not your character can talk. I don't think it's the end-all be-all. If your character can talk, for example, I think that the game should account for it and make sure that it has various voices instead of just 2, for example. That would be a starting point for fixing the talking issue in Fallout in general. The second thing I would do is make the options within, whichever sex you pick at the start of the game. Once that has occurred, make it sure that you can go, again, in a way more variant ways of expressing your character, rather than, maybe your character can come off as a lot more in between, or maybe, again, certain stats can affect things in a different way in terms of being able to talk a certain way. Maybe you're just a pure charismatic character, and, even that alone, just the way you talk. Not even saying in good guy or bad guy, just the way you talk within the context of being good guy and bad guy. The very dialogue options would carry with that this more eloquent way of speaking, perhaps. So those are a few options that I would definitely pick within Fallout. And the big thing about Fallout is that now that you opened it up to multiple type of character archetypes, perhaps what you should allow is for more variance within moving the stories, plural, forward. If this season is anything to go by, I think that's where they ought to go through with the video games as well, in terms of, making sure their game is up to snuff with, again, video game buglessness. And, quite frankly, I'm gonna say it, the graphics in Fallout 3 and 4 don't hold up as well as they ought to in this current age, so probably getting better face capture motions in Fallout 3 and 4 for quote-unquote this Fallout 5 that I would be proposing to have made. I would definitely probably go with having a bit more of this face capturing motion stuff going on, just so that the characters can be way more expressive and way more realistic looking as well, and way more varied on top of that. In the customization options, that is another area where I can see Fallout, again, improving vastly from where it stood, from even 4. From hairstyles to face styles, ethnicity, and all of that stuff. Just make it so it's very comprehensive to where a lot of modern games in the character creation aspect have been, very of higher quality, so I would suspect that Fallout should match that at the very most at this current era, if it was to ever even come back, which it came back as a season and show, sure, but I don't know, again, as a video game, I don't know if it could come back. Anyway, that is a longer discussion about video games where I've gotten distracted from the actual show. So as I was saying about the show, we follow Lucy, who is this naive vault dweller who, after they have, since they have been trapped there for so long from an earlier era of Earth, they sort of carry over similar practices, that being married off, being a thing that just casually happens. But for the purposes of perhaps yielding better crops in a trade of sorts. So this is a type of wedding that used to happen in the olden days. Yes, fathers would used to sell off their daughters for crop. That is literally what used to happen in the olden days. That is a thing that used to happen in America, yes. I know that seems unbelievable, but it's true. So unfortunately, she gets the bad end of the stick, and his people, the guy that comes over, are all raiders, including himself. So they have to fight them off. Now, a good deal of them end up being captured after the amount of damage that they have done. And the season, as it sort of follows along, shows what the characters sort of want to do with them throughout. Meanwhile, the dad has been captured among these vault dwellers and is pulled away. And I will say from the intro to this point, the intro to this point, there is another 200-year gap. And I gotta say, Fallout writers, please stop using a time jump meter of hundreds of years, please. That's literally what ruined Fallout 4. Like, seriously. There is an error due to the time jump that certain characters make, aka the guy who steals the baby, being as old as he is from the flashback 200 or 100 years ago, the same timeline as he is in the current timeline. And that guy's not even a ghoul. He's a human being that somehow lasted 200 years and has somehow not died as a not ghoul. Yeah, that breaks the entire story, because that breaks the main, or one of the main antagonists. There you go. So, there's my first piece of advice for Fallout moving forward. Stop jumping ahead 200 years. You clearly don't know how to do it. Though, they try to do it somewhat with the ghoul here, which, from the lore of Fallout, ghouls happen to live longer than humans. That is something that has been built in from even Fallout 3, so that is kept in line. So I can actually buy the ghoul living for that long. So, you know what? Fine. From his perspective, he can live 200 years. Fine. But some of the other bits that follow 200 years, oh boy. Because there's also freezing, and in addition to freezing being a part of this equation of human beings, is cloning. Yeah, we'll get to that. So, Lucy's father gets captured, so he's out in the wasteland somewhere, so Lucy heads out, against the wishes of fellow vault dwellers. Along the way, she comes in contact with the ghoul, who has his own prioritizing methods, and he seems, at least from her perspective, to be her antagonist, though his mission seems to be on a whole different scale from his perspective. Again, the show does perspectives a little bit better than what I was expecting, at least initially. But, I mean, things fall apart pretty quickly. I mean, this is Fallout. I'm not surprised at all that it fell apart from my perspective, as, again, someone who is talking to about Fallout 4 being a mess. Yeah, again, I'm not surprised. The same, if it's especially the same writers. So, anyways, Maximus over here on the right, he is a Brotherhood. He's like a scribe at first, if I remember that correctly, or he's like beneath that. Initiate? I don't remember. I don't remember his rank beforehand. But he's like in the Brotherhood, and he was picked up from outside the Brotherhood, though. So he's like the outcast being pulled into an in-group, essentially. And now, in the game of Fallout, the Squire, I believe, is what he was. I could be wrong. The Squires tended to be kids, if I remember that correctly. And then Initiates were like a higher rank, I think. I don't remember. I don't remember all the ranks. I already forgot, but whatever. It's not it's not crucial to the plot. I'm just trying to remember all the terms. The knight, the thing above those, regardless, is who he's following, this particular knight into, while finding this guy that they're all sort of entangled in finding. Now, the initial meetup already kind of doesn't make sense. Let me explain. So, Lucy comes into, comes in contact with the doctor, who somehow finds her through luck, a grave deal of coincidence, but whatever, we'll let that one slide. Through her fire, so whatever. He happened to be nearby and spotted her fire. We'll say that happened, even though, whatever. So, he begins to talk to her about how she ought to be prepared about how much the world is going to change her. Now, I will say, the dialogue here, even early on, is very direct, which I don't necessarily have a problem with in the context of dealing with this type of character. Let me explain. So, a lot of people like to use the phrase, show don't tell, right? However, this is a character that who is very naive, and a Vault Dweller on top of being naive. This makes her the way you ought to talk to a character like this is very directly. They're not going to understand subtlety or sarcasm in the same ways that, or up-top talk, if you want to use that terminology. There are definitely going to be various things that a character who has been very sheltered would not understand. So I actually do appreciate this, and it actually indicates something about his character on top of that. It likely also tells us that he was also a Vault Dweller, which again shows that this show does have some competence in its writing. It's far from perfect. Let me make that clear. But there is promise here. To make that clear, much like much of the world building itself in Fallout, it is very promising, which is why this sort of gets me excited for the potential for a Fallout 5 that will likely never come out, though. I don't know, at any rate, getting back into the focus of things. So, while her introduction, or introduction to the world, while some may critique it and say, well, show don't tell, no, I'm pretty sure there will be someone who says that, or the writing is very direct. I'm sure someone will make that criticism, and to me that just wouldn't fit, especially if he was once a Vault Dweller himself. If that is the lore to be believed from what we see. At any rate, what doesn't fit is the ghoul. He somehow ends up in the same location by happenstance. His journey actually makes less sense than hers. to get to that town. Now, granted, he's looking for the same target, sure, and he happens to now be there, which is even more bizarre that now he's showing up a second time with Lucy a second time, which makes the whole coincidence thing even crazier already. Again, this all happens in episode 1, by the way. And we have now 2 instances of this happening. And the problem with this is that it makes the world feel small. But, asterisk, I'm going to turn that on its head. This world is also simultaneously pretty big, surprisingly. I mean, we do see the characters traveling a lot, too, to make up for that, to compensate for when they happen to coincide in areas that remake the world feel small. So, it turns out that the world perhaps is a bit more medium-sized. I'm happy to call it that. It's medium-sized. It feels decently sized, we'll say, for the sake of simplicity. So characters happening to come across to each other isn't the biggest break I think this first episode carries with in terms of the rest of the season. Now, of course, Maximus also ends up here, because of course he does. He was on his way with a similar, if not same mission as Lucy, find this guy. And for the sake of this guy has a MacGuffin in his head, or his neck specifically. This MacGuffin will power up the wasteland, essentially. Just like in Fallout 3, there's literally the water cleansing thing ending in Fallout 3. That's literally the ending of Fallout 3. Spoiler alert for that old game. So again, I'm not sure where people are lost on the lore of the ending of Fallout as a season. I don't know. But point being that we have our power source, aka our MacGuffin that all 3 of our characters are chasing for one reason or another. The ghoul just wanting the bounty, Lucy wanting it to trade for her father, and Max wanting it to appease the Brotherhood and to help them achieve their goals. So, we have 3 different characters with 3 different motives to get the same thing. Now, lightly later down on that path, Lucy and Max team up to get to the head. And Lucy makes a pretty interesting little arrangement here, saying that she will help track it with her Pip-Boy and to get to the head faster, and in doing so, once they reach it, she wants him to have his Brotherhood, knights come in and help her with the dad issue. So, quid pro quo transaction here. Not necessarily one of caps, but one of helping for helping's sake and then getting a help in return. So, yeah, there's that. Now, throughout the season, we have Lucy getting lifted up by the little vault bobbleheads throughout the season. Every time she looks one, she's like, yeah, that's where I'm from. And she's definitely immediately pushed. In compensation, and in conjunction with her, I honestly feel really bad for Max, because it feels like this is the second time this is happening to a character. Let me explain. His journey feels eerily not far too removed from one thin of Star Wars infamy. That being a character who is also black, by the way, just gonna point that out. I don't know. I'm gonna point that out, because it's kind of suspicious that the same sort of the same sort of wonky stuff starts happening to his character, where a lot of the comedy seems to surround his character. It's really frustrating that it's happened again, and I feel like I need to call out that direct comparison that I don't think a lot of people might make, but I'm definitely going to point it out. It's definitely very weird. And here's the thing, is that his journey should probably be the most serious among the three. If anything, a lot of the comedy should come from the main character, or Lucy. A lot of the comedy ought to come from her naivete, and yeah, some of the early stuff does, sure, but that kind of fades away rather quickly. In fact, I would say as soon as she makes that deal with Max, it kind of just goes away. And yeah, Max is sort of left to this sidelined journey, and it gets worse with him again, because there's this whole part where they end up in this other vault 4. So one of the very first vaults, I should mention, if they were, made in sequential order, I would assume. I would guess they would be. So one of the first vaults that ever came to be, we have him there. She's also there. They're both there. They both fell into it. And, she's sort of investigating around because she's getting more and more off-put by the people she's seeing and the different mutations that have occupied their faces. And boy, do the effects just not look great for some of them. While some of them do, it's, hit and miss for this perspective from this little thing. But she has a whole different thing going on here, where he, for that entire sequence, or at least the majority of it, begins to just sort of relax and take in the vault life. And I can see what they were trying to go for, but at the same time, it feels like there are certain things that he ought to know about. Maybe. Like, I think, if I remember this correctly, I don't even think he knew what a shower was, or a hot shower anyways. Like, you would think, or I would assume, that in the Brotherhood, they would have, like, a facility that would still have hot water. No? Would they not have that? Really? I thought they had some good tech. I guess not? Question mark? It just seems... That world building does seem off for Fallout. It comes across as really, like, head tilty that the Brotherhood wouldn't have some up-to-date technology, or at least warm water of all things. It seems like that would be above some of the, quality of life things that they would have, but I guess not. I don't know, but here we are. So yeah, he's taking all that in, and while that's going on, Lucy is dealing with people, taking off their tops and being all culty and whatnot. So yeah, there's that scene, that happens. And yeah, it's definitely meant to be off-putting, sure, and it is, so I guess they accomplished their goal. But I digress. At any rate, yeah, Max seems to be most victimized in this sort of way, where again, it feels like the arc that I would expect him to go under or follow would paint out the more serious aspects of, Fallout, especially from what I understand of the Brotherhood and Fallout 4, especially. You know, their whole deal is get rid of ghouls, get rid of super mutants at any cost. You know, they're all the enemy. And, you know, I think a clear archetype for his character to potentially go down, if you're going to offset him anyways, is to have him see ghouls like the ghoul and be, like, off-put by him, and maybe initially. And then, you know, super mutants as well. There aren't any super mutants, by the way. Which, okay, that's a bit odd of a choice, considering how, you know, big they are in the game, but here we are without them. Deathclaws are also suspiciously missing from Season 1, which is, again, I would grant probably a interesting choice again among the creature selection that they have. I mean, they do rad roaches, sure. We have the Yaogwai, or the mutated bear, known as. And they have the Brahmin, the mutated cow with the 2 heads. But then they have a regular deer. I was like, Fallout does also have radiated deer, by the way, in Fallout 4. Just gotta point that out. But again, I actually don't... I kind of know what they were going for, because they were trying to, like, offset, you know, Lucy into a false sense of security so that she could get captured by a gloop monster. Which, I don't even know what this thing is in the Fallout universe, because I've never seen anything like it in any of the Fallout games. Now, it's a water-based creature, and I haven't even seen this in the DLC, like this mutated thinga creature, whatever it is. It's definitely not a Mirelurk, that's for sure, because it doesn't even have a shell. So I don't know what that thing is, or what it's meant to be. Maybe it's a new thing that they were trying to do? I don't know. But anyway. So, yeah. And here's the thing, right? In one of the episodes, we have the ghoul who was chasing the head. And this is probably the moment I hate the most about this entire season. It's the thing I would point to and be like, you knew what you were doing, and yet you still did it? Really? You fucking idiots. So, here we are. He has a clear goal in mind. Get the head. He knows where, generally speaking, it is. Or, he has a loose idea where it is, excuse me. Because it's currently in the water. And abruptly, out of nowhere, he just goes, yeah, we're just gonna fuck off. And I kid you not, and I'm gonna paraphrase because I don't remember exactly the line word for word, but he essentially said, we're essentially just gonna do something else. AKA, a side quest. I am not joking. He paraphrases the mockery of Fallout's side quest. That should hit particularly solidly well for anyone who's played Fallout 4 specifically. So let's make the direct comparison. So, your journey in Fallout 4 is to find your son. It is always your son, no matter if you pick the mom or the dad. You find your son, Sean, right? And that's always his name, by the way, no matter what. But, along him missing, you can, as a player, get sidetracked by all the miscellaneous side quest that pulls you away from getting any closer to finding your son. Now that is up to you, the player, to do. But for a character to do that comes the fuck out of absolutely nowhere. It makes zero sense for a character who's not controlled by a player to do that. So the joke doesn't make any logical sense whatsoever other than to mock the very idea of side quest. That's the only point of having that line in the entire show, is to be like, our side quests were kinda dumb, but we're gonna make it like it's a thing. It's so frustrating. It's beyond frustrating. It's like, come on. Seriously? You could have done that so much better. You could have just have him give up, naturally. That's all you had to do. And then he's like, then he can go, I'm just gonna do something else because my thing is gone, right? My goal is currently gone as far as I'm concerned. So I might as well take care of something else in the meantime. That would make more sense for the character to do, because a character would follow a set of, like, cause and effect in his own brain, Because I can still see the goal, I'm going to move towards the goal. But, and treating it like a mathematical equation, but if I can no longer reach the goal, and there doesn't seem to be any way to get to that equation being true, then I will proceed to try another mathematical equation, aka another quest. They don't do that, though, which is, again, extremely frustrating. So, we have two characters who have, one gets completely just mocked throughout, which again, so reminds me of Flynn from, or, was it Flynn? Oh god, Finn, sorry. From the Star Wars. And we have the Ghoul, who makes one of the, you know what, I am going to say, it's the worst line in this season. It is. It is easily the worst thing or decision he makes in the entire show. It makes him go from a competent character to being completely, like, just on something else. I don't know. Like, and then he becomes a badass again. But in that very moment, I went, what is this character doing? What is he doing? It makes no there's zero logic to this. So, yeah, it is bad for them. And for Lucy, boy, does she get her own, like, whiplash of stuff happening to her. But that happens at the very end of the show. The last episode, in other words. So let's go over that. So obviously, she learns the location of her father. She has the head. And she's told to go ahead. And yes, there is a romance between her and Max, whose romance feels very... It feels very Star Wars. It feels very flat. It feels like people who didn't know how to write romance trying to find a way to write romance in their stories. That is explicitly what this felt like, too. Because all the relationships in Disney Star Wars felt very weird. All of them. Not just one, all of them did. So, yeah. It definitely feels like that, too. It feels like none of the writers knew how to write romance specifically. And that definitely comes across here. Now, from Lucy's perspective, that sort of makes sense, right? She's the naive girl who was once sold off, and she was just kind of doing it to, because that's the place that she thought she needed to be, because that's the way she was growed up to be, right? She was groomed to believe that's the way she needed to be. So from her perspective, it makes some sense from her perspective that the dialogue would be very wonky and very, like, a little bit messy and a little bit awkward. But from his perspective, I mean, the problem with him is that there is a much clearer gap that we see. I mean, they all have a gap. They all have a kid, well, the two of them, the humanoids, have a gap of childhood to adulthood. Now, from childhood to adulthood, Lucy, the naivete seems to, again, be a constant up until she teams up with Max. From Max, we see him escape a refrigerator from the explosion, which, by the way, in Fallout, we have in a refrigerator a ghoul, by the way, so, ooh, kind of messing with your own lore again there, but, you know, you wanted to, I don't know if you were trying to poke fun of, you know, Indiana Jones there by having him be completely undamaged, but whatever. So we have a child head into, you know, this, space where he's safe, right? The crater is asunder, and he's picked up by the Brotherhood. But from that point to the point we see him at, getting bullied and whatnot, the gap there is much more, like, something had to have changed in him. He went from a different point where he was to where he is, where Lucy stayed in her naivete. So from his perspective, everything seems even more off. And that's what makes the relationship just not work, is that we have two characters, one of which her naivete is pushing it in a direction that makes sense, whereas from the other way, it doesn't make any sense because we have that gap of no knowledge whatsoever of the character. Like, did he not develop relationship feelings for anyone else during his time? Did he not, like... Then again, I guess the Brotherhood, at least the camp we see, seems to be only guys? Question mark? Though there does seem to be that one initiate, I don't know which sex they are, so I will refrain from saying as such, because I don't know. This is like Max's quote-unquote friend at the time, I guess, or they work together. I don't know. There's not enough information about the Brotherhood. Let's just say that. There's not enough information because they didn't give it enough time. They seriously didn't. And the way I would fix that is I would have given... And here we have this issue again, because now we're going to get to the heart of it. The pacing is the issue here. It really is. It crucifies this entire show from being what could have been an excellent show to being a middling show. The pacing plus the characters, or lack thereof, that specific combination is what makes Fallout 4 a middling mess. So let me explain. There should have been an additional 3 episodes to Fallout as a season. The first episode, and they should have deleted the first episode of this completely and just reworked it. The first episode should have focused, and I mean focused, on Lucy and her alone. Set it up completely, add a little bit more context, even following her from some of her young years and showing a bit more of her naivete throughout. You can do a little bit more of flashbacks. You can also do all sorts of stuff to build up her character. Do that all in one episode. Character established. Fantastic. Moving on, episode 2, we follow on Max. Then you build up the Brotherhood from the ground up. From his perspective, an outsider moving in. We see him being, pulled over. We perhaps get a montage of his journey, what the lectures were like, what the Brotherhood sound like, how different it is from, the very neighborly, welcoming society of being a Vault Dweller. Really set those two worlds as far apart as possible, but have it be focused so that we know what the Brotherhood is in the context from his perspective, because we have no fucking clue what any of his training is, or how he sees the Brotherhood, except that he wants to be the top of the top night guy. That's all we know that he wants, but we don't know why. And that's what's missing from him. We don't know why. We don't know what grooming things happened within that facility that made it click. Made it go, oh, that right there? That's why. Not just seeing the suit. Something beyond seeing the suit. Some word, some phrase, the discipline, I don't know, something else needs to be added to his character that is gravely missing from his character in this season. Needs to be put in his independent episode to fix the show. Then have the third episode, and then we follow the Ghoul. And then all you would have to do is rearrange all of his sections and stretch it out a little bit more. Have it from his human perspective. Start it from there. His journey through life. Learning, being this famous celebrity way back when. And learning, slowly but surely, that his wife had some, is in the business, is in the vault tech. She's getting access to all this stuff. Having him spend more time with his daughter, because we know nothing about her other than this one scene. Have more scenes of that, of them and just interacting, being a family. Basic stuff. Build it up. And then you follow him even further. And you don't black out and skip to another character, when he's, galloping away from the explosions. You keep following him, and you have to lead him somewhere where we would actually see how he would become a ghoul. I would suspect we would get an answer to that, right? And just as interesting, how he got separated from his daughter at the time, because he implies by the end of the season, which, again, with that 200-year gap, would have to either assume that the daughter has to also be a ghoul, or what? Like, what is the other outcome? Because I do not know how she would survive 200 years of time. Why would he still be looking for his family after 200 years if they're not ghouls? It would not make any logical sense. Which is why the end of his character arc is baffling to me right now. Again, other than if they're not also ghouls. Right? They would have to be, if that is his goal that we learn at the end of the season. They would have to be ghouls. Or maybe super mutant? I don't know. I think super mutants last long. I actually don't know a lot of lore about super mutants' aging process, so I actually don't know about that one, but whatever. Point being is that there is a clear issue that needs to be resolved if they are going to get a season 2, which they were definitely trying to push for a season 2. They were really trying to do that with the way this ends. The father gets away because we learn he's a clone from 200 years ago that that killed his mom because the mom wanted to explore the outside world while pregnant. You know, she wanted to take her chances out there, so he killed her and took the daughter and raised her in the vault, is what his dialogue implies. And, you know, they have the power source there, and they put it in the leader there, one of the quote-unquote antagonists for that moment, or at least from the beginning section, does it. So she learns what has become of her mother. She became a ghoul, clearly. Again, from the context of the flashbacks versus what's happening now, that's clearly meant to be what's happening, and the dad allowing that to be the outcome of that. So she doesn't pick the dad, but the dad gets away. Eventually. He eventually gets in the suit, the Brotherhood suit, and flies off somewhere else. Where else? I don't know. It's some other city, though. And then I forget what specific city this is set in. And I should have paid attention to that, because, again, 3 and 4 take place in different cities, and that seems to lean credence to behaviors and patterns of how characters interact, typically speaking. If you're from an area, and if you're from a very different area, your outcome will be very different. So, my bad on not picking up on where they were in this, the city and the post-apocalyptic version of it. But I digress. Point is that the stinger for Season 2 is that he is clearly entering a different city. And that was Fallout. So, clearly, this is a 5 out of 10. I'm not even going to dance around it. This is a mid show, at best. I can't give it any higher. There is promise. There is good stuff here. But man, is it riddled with plenty of bad. That just makes you go, it's sort of in between. And that's my review of Fallout. So, yeah, that is what it is. I don't know if Season 2 will be any better, because the track record shows that Fallout has struggled with its storytelling even now, so I don't know. I don't think so. But I guess it's a wait and see. So yeah, that's my review for Fallout Season 1. If you ended up enjoying it, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. 1 to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers. 2nd to my PayPal where you can help support me and my channel directly. And 3rd to my Discord server you can join, collab, and chill, and do all that cool stuff. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye!